What job is less fun than people expect? Story 1: zookeeper, vet tech, animal care tech at an animal shelter, wildlife biologist. Everyone thinks it's playing with animals all day. Speaking from experience, those are some of the most grueling, underappreciated, and underpaid positions a person can have. They can be rewarding, but they are rarely how people romanticize them. Anyway, I work in IT now. Story 2: most blue-collar jobs. I used to work as a construction helper, and not gonna lie, the job itself is actually quite fun. The issue is the shitty alpha male attitude everyone on the site had. Someone seriously through an unplugged circular saw at me at one point. ATM, I'm going back to my old job, which I honestly didn't mind. I was a molder. Same exact issue. That's why I find it funny when people in blue-collar fields say nobody wants to work. No, nobody wants to be around you because you're insufferable. Story 3: working with creators and influencers. Early in my career, I worked at a well-known ad agency that connected F500 companies to mid and top-tier influencers. Many of them weren't usually bright, had no business sense, and were just charismatic, pretty people who struck out in another aspect of their life and found fame on social media. They had no long-term skills or vision, just manipulated social media algorithms. Story 4: professional craft brewer. The hours are horrible, the pay is terrible, and the industry is small enough that it's entirely possible for a bad boss to blacklist you if you try to leave. They rely on a steady inflow of home brewers who dream of working professionally to keep pay low. I swear, most of the industry tries to act cool and or upscale, but it's basically perpetual startup mode without any hope of an IPO cash out. Story 5: being an airline pilot is consistently boring. Waiting in airports, being in hotels, watching instruments or clouds for hours, but the job itself, at times, is an absolute blast. Story 6: neuroscience. You think you're going to discover amazing things about the human brain, but you're mostly dealing with noisy images of blood flow, which tell us very little. Story 7: PetSmart. You think it's cool to just sell stuff and take care of the animals and sell them. But no one talks about the sick room in the back. You get a shipment of hamsters, but have to keep them separate for a few days because there's always sick ones. It's kind of sad to have to throw a hamster or gerbil in the trash every day. Also the trauma you have to put the finches through every day when you catch them in the net. Story 8: honestly, programming. There's a perception of it being this really fun thing to do. Every single day, I see people saying learn to code. Most of the time is quite dull. Nobody is sitting there cranking out lines of code like they're writing a book. In reality, you write a bit of code, spend an hour trying to figure out why it's not working, tons of Googling and troubleshooting and crawling through documentation. Rinse and repeat. Story 9: everyone saying construction who told you it was fun. I've never once heard someone say construction sounds like fun. That's why you go school. Story 10: working in a library. Very mind-numbing as you just put labels on books and enter in data for the labels literally. That's the main task. A lot of people think of it as intellectually stimulating. It really isn't. Story 11: pool service. No, women don't throw themselves at you. At least not all of them. If you're working on condo pools, everyone is mad at you because they have to get out of the pool. Story 12: EMS. Did 25 years as a paramedic, and I got the bad back to show for it. Plus some nice PTSD from a few calls that no one should have been there to witness. Story 13: construction. I got a lot of at least you get to be outside. That is 120 degrees in Arizona, and I'm about 99 sure I had a mini heat stroke earlier, and I'm getting paid nothing relative to what I could be. But yeah, at least I got to be outside, teaching especially younger kids like kindergarten. I thought it would be all fun and laughter, but instead everyone is on your case about Common Core curriculum. You deal with sucky parents and more lesson planning than lesson teaching. Story 14 from 99 of the comments of this thread. I noticed that the job is not the issue or the boring part, but it's the shitty work conditions that are now everywhere that people find awful. Story 15: pharmacist. Everyone assumes we just count by fives and we just grab meds off the shelf. There's much more to it, like making sure both your doctor and I don't kill harm you. Story 16: dog training and grooming. Just seems like people are like, OMG, working with dogs sounds amazing. You can love dogs, but it's not really a fun job after a while regardless. Story 17: I worked in a haunted house when I was a teen. Scaring people gets old really fast. Everybody that walks into your room makes the same dumb joke, and you get pushed all the time. Story 18: I work at Planned Parenthood. People keep telling me that I'm doing a great job supporting reproductive health during this time, but it's exhausting. The pay is low. Everyone's quitting. Patients keep yelling. Don't get me wrong, I love the work I do. I just didn't expect it to be so exhausting and physically, mentally harmful. Story 19: anything in the tourism industry. There's a honeymoon phase as with any job, but after the first season, you just get sick of being around people on vacation. 247. I'd rather work in a soulless assembly line position than what I'm doing now. Story 20, anything in law enforcement, the legal system. People listen to true crime podcasts and think that every day in court is an explosive revelation, and every police report is this well-written, detail-filled record of what actually occurred. Cases take months or years to reach court, and every single person has a blurry memory at that stage. Police will refer to shorthand notes written on paper from 5 years ago and have to decipher their own notes in front of the jury. To even reach the stage of getting a jury can be years of pretrial hearings. People who complain about jury service for a week have no idea that's the most interesting week of the case, and there is plenty of time before and after the trial that is just a slog. And that's assuming you can make it through the trial without the judge, the counsel, the juniors, the lawyers, or the jurors catching COVID. So you have to start the trial over again. True crime podcasts are the spark notes of any legal proceedings, just the important and interesting parts. Story 21, any of the high social status, low-pay jobs. Journalism, some digital media, almost anything in international relations, a lot of academia, especially in the humanities, etc. It's not really well advertised that these aren't really jobs for regular people and are more akin to pastimes for the failed children of the elite. If you don't come from generational wealth and end up doing one of these, chances are you'll be struggling to make a living while your colleagues somehow find all sorts of creative ways to summer in Europe. Plus, since a lot of people don't need the money, there will be all sorts of competition that's able to undercut you from most opportunities. Story 22, it seems that about 80 of job hate could be solved with better pay. It's time to get those over-bloated billionaire ticks tweezed off the world population. Story 23, all of them. People say do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Bullshit. If you turn something you love into work, you won't be loving it for long because there will be days you just don't feel like it. When it's a hobby, you could do it tomorrow. When it's work, you have to it up and done it all day, every day. Story 24, I owned a toy game store for a while, like actual children's toys and homeschool supplies, you pervs, not tentacle-shaped dildos and stuff. It was fun adjacent, but not that great. It was super easy to find staff, though. All the local teens and 20-somethings thought it would be way more fun to work for me than work in food service or whatever. Story 25, I have a lot of friends and former college mates that are pilots. Many of them, especially the airline pilots for the major carriers, complain about their job a lot. When they were in college and flying for fun, they enjoyed it. But once it becomes work, it's no longer fun. Story 26, park ranger is really dependent on location and what level you are at. As an interpretive ranger, which is what most people think of when they hear the title, you usually get awful pay but pretty easy responsibilities. When you step up above that, you quickly become somewhat responsible for nearly everything on your site. Bills, maintenance, landscaping, planning, budgeting, meetings, community outreach, etc. And then there's also the visitors. I'd say 80 to 85 of the people I deal with are usually good people, but man, that other 15 to 20 will really make you lose faith in humanity. If you've ever seen the subpar parks reviews, then trust me when I tell you those are real. I once had to tell some people not to poke a rattlesnake with a stick. You also inevitably get people who will try to draw you into a political discussion about your site, if there's any history involved there whatsoever, and that becomes a very delicate game. I do like my job, don't get me wrong, but man, you gotta know what you're getting into. Story 27, just to say, going back to a job I find boring in November, having been on maternity leave, this thread is a real good reminder that most jobs are probably not that fun. I actually needed to read this. Story 28, professional artist 29F, it's great, it's fulfilling, but everyone in your family will tell you their new great art idea and will emotionally exhaust you as you explain why it won't work, or they'll assume you're doing it if you don't put in the energy to rebuke and demand why you're not working on their idea. It's agonizing work, especially when I do murals, because it's physically laborious. You get street harassment, and everyone has an opinion, except none of these people understand how painting and art works. Not to mention, when I make art, my self-worth is on the line. When I started this work, I was appalled when I realized my dream job will also make me miserable at times, LOL. I've threatened to go be a counselor or try for doctor just so I can have a job that people won't try to insert themselves into. Basically, as an artist, you need to learn to be impeccable with boundaries with other people. No intention of throwing in the hat yet, though. Story 29, lift ops at a ski resort. No, you don't get to ski all day. Instead, you get to stand in the cold, shovel snow, and have Karens yell at you because they can't figure out how to sit down properly. Story 30, retail at a store where you love to shop, a store dedicated one of your hobbies. AKA, you don't get to play with makeup all day working for a beauty store. I bet it's probably the same experience at bookstores, craft stores, etc. Having to help mean people pursue a hobby you enjoy can kind of ruin your love of whatever hobby over time. Story 31 musician. Lots more scales and similarly boring exercises than creativity. It's a lot of the same stuff over and over again, especially in the classical world. You might play Nutcracker 40 times in 1 month, every year of your career. How many hundreds of times has Leslie Odom Jr. sang Wait For It? How many times has Swiftie sang Love Story? How many times has a jazz player done the big standards? It's not anywhere close to as creative and varied as people think. Story 32, all of them. Even if you like the work, there's always the bitter juvenile office politics and backstabbing that makes even the best job difficult to stand sometimes. I'm convinced that even the petty, insecure people doing the politicking and backstabbing hate it. Story 33. I don't know if people think it's fun, but people glorify becoming a registered nurse, I think. I've been one for like 5 years, and let me tell you, it's not at all what people think. Story 34. Working in the cannabis industry. Sure, there are some fun, maybe even considered glamorous positions, but 90 to 98 of it absolutely sucks. Hey, I get to work with weed all day, quickly turns into I might actually hate weed. Story 35. Firefighter. I actually love my job, but it's all about finding a routine and being able to adapt. It's 99 boredom and about 1 excitement. It's not like backdraft at all. It's a lot of hurry up and wait and mind-numbing boredom. Most guys just sit in the recliner and watch TV all day. I make sure I study some technical aspect of my job, train, work out, and read every day. I also dedicate a part of my day to learning something new, totally unrelated to my job. At the moment, I'm learning Arabic. I read an obscene amount of books. The hours are sweet, though. I only work 10 days a month. I could never go back to the 8 to 5 grind. Plus, being a city job, there's a lot of new policy that you have to adapt to, and a lot of times it has virtually zero effect on your day-to-day. But people complain because they're bored, and complaining is something to do. Like I said, find a positive and proactive routine, and you'll be fine. I don't sit down and watch TV until after I've eaten dinner. It makes my shift go by fast. Story 36. Author. It's harder to write a good book than most people realize. It's expensive to get it edited and formatted. You almost certainly won't make enough to live on, and people get very fussy if you don't give away your work for free. Almost all ebooks cost less than $5. It's not a lot to ask for. Story 37. Restaurant reporter. A very close relative of mine did that for decades for a very major publication. She was doing a story on pizza. She took me to have a mind-blowingly good slice. She made me throw it out after 1 bite. You can't eat anymore. We have 8 more places to try. The next 8 slices were either okay or sucked. And when she would go to do a review of a single restaurant, she had to try all the signature dishes. Even if she didn't like that type of food, worse still was when she was recognized, and the chef would bring out a ton of stuff and hover over her while she ate it, chatting her up and watching her every reaction. She was always under an insane deadline and generally worked 80 to 90 hours a week and only took off 4 days a year. She would dream about staying home, eating something simple, and having time off, while she was paid reasonably well for a normal work week. The pay was meh considering the huge hours. And while she was very well respected, there is no such thing as pressing for better working conditions, since there were literally hundreds of thousands of people competing for that single job in a very cash-strapped industry. Story 38. Being part of the crew who makes TV shows. By that, I mean all the folks below the line: hair and makeup, wardrobe, gripping and electric, location, props, cameraman, production, etc. Story 39. I worked as a cake decorator, and everyone seemed to think that it must be amazingly fun. But my days were filled with Karens and people who don't know their children asking me, what's 7-year-old boys like? Story 40. Academia. Sounds cool to think you'll be talking about intellectual concepts all day, but these days most of the work is adjuncting, and these people do not even make living wages. Story 41. I meet lots of college students who have romantic ideas about what it means to be an English professor, like it's all Dead Poet Society. It's about 10 like that. The other 90 is grading and planning and fighting for scraps dropped by the senior faculty who should have retired a decade ago. Story 42. Working in sports. Everyone's like, cool, you get to pay to watch games. Nah, it's our job to keep the event fun and safe for fans. A lot of behind-the-scenes stuff no one thinks about. It was my dream job until the very second it wasn't. Now that I'm out, I don't know what normal people do on holiday weekends. My therapist is helping me work through holiday apathy dread. She told me to delete the weather app from my phone, so I'm not checking it all day long. Huge stress relief to not check it on holiday weekend. Story 43. Archaeology. There are times where it's stunning, but 90 of the time the jobs and conditions are. And it's just slowly scraping away hours and hours of empty dirt containing all. Story 44. Working on a cruise ship. Modern-day slave ships, to be honest. No OT applied unless you work over 320 hours in a month. I constantly had overtime, am American, and they treat workers in a caste system to be paid what they're worth based on people's native origin. I could do the same job as a peer, but make way more, because I'm American. Also, being paid way more isn't, you barely make 20 hours for a job you could do locally for 2 to 3 times as much money. You can't ever be over 0.08 BAC, because you have to be responsible for passengers in the event of an emergency. I was an audio tech for the theater at the time. So, lots of rehearsals, managing guest entertainers, resetting the stage for tomorrow, etc., plus being on call from 6 o'clock a.m. to 1:30 a.m. the next day. Before you think, well, at least you get to travel, I maybe had 3 hours at most for one day in a different country. During any time I could get away from the ship, I would, just for real coffee, not syrup-based coffee. Yes, that is a thing that I didn't know existed, and an actual internet connection. No time to sleep, no time to explore, no time to rest. That I had one contract for 8 months. Never again. I was a retail security K-9 officer. The being a K-9 officer was awesome. Dog school was the best 6 weeks ever, training with my dog and hanging out with the other baby handlers in the dorm, working with my dog off duty. Awesome. Then on shift, it was still pretty fun, working the dog, finding guns, etc., but it was the same mall 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. It lacked some of the fun stuff we did in dog school. We weren't running searches on cars, we weren't working luggage, going and searching wide open fields, etc. In training, we would run an event and then hang out waiting for the other teams and the reset. On my assigned location, there were no other teams. If I wasn't running the dog, I was driving around the parking lot at 10 miles per hour, I would absolutely do it again, but it could definitely get really boring at times. Story 45: programming development in general. Not just games, it was fun in college, but with almost the entire industry run by psychopaths, the work is just way too intense and draining. It doesn't need to be this way. Story 46: cybersecurity engineer. Sounds glamorous, but it's just going through logs and explaining to Tim in accounting why he can't use Steam on his work-issued laptop. Story 47: park ranger. It has its special moments, but you're working EMS, law enforcement, wildland fire, SCR, and depending on the agency, also interp and maintenance read, cleaning human and off walls. The novelty starts to wear off rather quickly, and you realize you're expected to wear all those hats for pennies on the dollar. Then there's the omnipresent understaffing, underfunding, poor housing, and a frequently incompetent bureaucracy exacerbating every problem. Add a few million ignorant yet stubbornly motivated visitors coming at you and your small cadre of competent souls every summer, and it's a wonder any ranger lasts more than a few years. Story 48: veterinary work in basically any capacity. It's not just playing with puppies all day, lots of death, overwhelming workloads due to worker shortage because people don't stay in the field, lots of disgusting scenarios, insane and sometimes abusive clients, severely underpaid, and it seems like 90 of the hospitals are full of mean girl bully types and equally mean doctors. Story 49: chef cook. You work crazy hours. You're almost never off on holidays and weekends, which your family and friends don't understand. The industry is hyper-competitive, substance abuse and abusive behavior are normalized. The expectations are high. Work-related injuries are frequent. It's tough on your body. Kitchens are usually hot AF. It's still a boys' club. Machismo attitudes abound. Your career usually isn't respected, almost always underpaid, and you're expected to have almost no emotions or needs. And almost everyone thinks they can be a chef because they cook at home. Like, okay, come talk to me after hour 6 of your 13-hour shift when you've sweated through your shirt and coat. You've been grinding and racing the clock the whole time. You're understaffed, so you get no breaks except for the random food item you eat hunched over garbage. And so you don't pass out from low blood sugar. You have to throw away plates of perfectly good food because of picky customers been yelled at twice. And burnt your hand badly, but you're not allowed to go home. Story 50: strip club. I was a strip club DJ for years, and the level of Dramavian and Cedric issues you have to deal with far outweigh the fun aspects of the job. Your day can get real scary sad real quick. And then everyone is like, but at least you get to see a lot of naked women, trust me. You get desensitized to the nudity pretty early on, or you don't last as an employee for very long. Story 51: demolition construction, because what no one but someone who has done it thinks of, you are cleaning far more than you're knocking stuff down. Also, it is far more physical than most realize, although I don't mind it, most lack what it takes to do 12-hour shifts 5 and 6 days a week. Story 52: pro sports outside of the top few in the best-paying sports. Your body hurts like you don't think is possible, and the schedule is incredibly demanding and unsociable. You also rarely have friends outside that sport or other sports die to scheduling. Story 53: being a business owner was supposed to be boating, profits, but it's just a lot of hard work with some boating sprinkled in, creative work in marketing and advertising. I managed a creative department for years, and clients would always say, "Oh, you're so lucky to have a fun job where you can create all these fun things." And I could only stare at them with my bloodshot eyes with the dark circles under them after another week of overtime, finishing 50 deadline-driven projects, including whole publications, that had each gone through 5 rounds of client revisions. Story 54, any job that requires traveling, like sales or technical service. It sounds great to be traveling all over country on company, but you are going from airport to corporate office to hotel to another airport. Rarely do you get to enjoy the location. Story 55, being a hairstylist LOL. People always say you're so lucky you get to play with hair all day, but it's quite the opposite. Long hours, full body pain, standing 8 to 10 hours a day, talking to people you don't want to talk to for hours, being expected to work magic on their hair, no breaks, no paid time off, sick pay, retirement benefits, listening to people's opinions on politics, humoring their drama, never mind the social media and everything that comes with it. People not tipping, nasty Yelp reviews even though you tried your absolute best. It's really not that glamorous. I'm so burnt out, and it's only been 8 years. I'm lucky that I'm able to use my hands to create a piece of art every day, grow someone's confidence, and meet some cool people, but it's hard work. Story 56, veterinarian. It's not always cute puppies and kittens. You'll be putting down pets, seeing neglected animals, animals brought in too late. Not to mention there are many mean, rude, entitled clients. Owners wanting you to cure their pets, but don't want to spend a single penny. Compassion fatigue, burnout, mental health down in the drain, and many more to mention. Well, this is speaking for veterinarians practicing in small animal practice clinic. Story 57, purchasing. Everyone I've told what I do for a living just thinks about it as being on the better side of the sales desk, that I get to do the ordering around instead of listening to others order me around. Reality is that my job performance is based entirely on work others do, or more importantly, don't do. Imagine you have a critical project coming up that amounts to a significant portion of your annual sales. You get quotes back for a key component of that project with a specific lead time, and that incoming date is published to your company. Now, the supplier you chose doesn't hold up their end of the bargain. They run over lead time, and your management starts getting upset because they can't complete the project. Sometimes, there's no amount of calling and emailing that will fix the situation. You're just doomed to continue communication with a shitty supplier while getting scolded by management until the supplier ships it. Story 58, any job at a startup. I work at a startup, and I love it. It's fun, but things are really difficult too because of no fixed timings and an ever-changing environment. There are days you might need to sleep at the office too. Story 59, financial advisor, stockbroker. People, or at least new advisors, sometimes think ITLL be like Wolf on Wall Street or Boiler Room with fast-paced excitement. In reality, it's convincing clients to not panic during a downturn and sell at a low, dealing with compliance, enforcing industry regulations, and understanding procedures paperwork to make things happen in addition to whatever designation they've earned to advise clients on financial planning investing. Story 60, video game QA. Oh, you get to play video games all day. That sounds like great fun. No, it is not. You're going to be scouring every last square inch of these games for possible bugs, sending in reports to the main development team, and 90 of your feedback is going to be ignored unless it actively crashes the game. Oh, and you're probably doing all this for minimum wage. Story 61, as a former bartender, you're dealing with drunk people. It is not a party for you. Don't get me wrong, it's a ton of fun and you meet a lot of people, but it is hard work and there's a lot of BS you have to put up with. Story 62, raft guiding. Basically, the entire job is about giving a boat full of people a fun experience, so you'd think it would be super fun, and at times it really is, but it is also brutally hard labor and the least fun way for us to run the river. Avoid the most fun stuff, put in additional effort to make up for lily-dipping paddlers. An unladen 14 feet hypoline boat weighs 140 pounds. More for urethane and PVC boats. Add another 30 pounds for a stern frame. Now think about stacking those 4 to 5 high on a trailer for times a day. In the morning, pull them all off, prep boats, res tack at the put in, pull them all off, rig, restack at takeout, repeat for a second run. Then back to the shop to pull them all off, derig, clean, then res tack again for storage for the next time. The time on the river is always great, but you beat the out of yourself for that time. Tip your guides, yo, they work hard and get paid. Story 63, most jobs LOL. Unless you own your own business and are very good at hiring other people to do the parts you don't like. But even in that case, hiring people to do the parts you don't like might be a part you don't like. Not to mention the years-long process of starting a business and the slog that can be. It seems that most jobs that people love are preceded by years of moving towards that job, through other phases or jobs that are aimed at that future job. Story 64 Airline Pilot. 90 of my job is waiting for others to do their job. No rampers to marshal us into the gate. No gate agent to hook up the jet bridge. All the packs are standing in the aisle looking more pissed by the second. Where's the fueler? Why did they short us 4,000 pounds? Looking at our dispatch release flight plan, weather, performance numbers, etc. Oh, we're missing an alternate airport in case we can't land at the destination because of the weather forecast. I called dispatch. He says I don't need one or extra fuel. I'm like, WTF, whether are you looking at? Either way, I'm not leaving till you give it to me. Argue back and forth. He finally agreed and sends us new fuel numbers. Now, we wait 30 minutes to an hour for fuel. Flight attendants having problems with passengers. They want them off. Now I have to call security, gate agent, ramp manager, tell dispatch, file a delay report, and then we can GTFO, get to our overnight after 2 to 4 flights. No hotel van, call scheduling, get an Uber voucher, and there's no Ubers available. I swear 90 is sitting around doing all, and then rushing to make up time because no one else cares. The hotels aren't glorious. It's days and weeks away from friends and family. But that other 10, that perfect landing, that sunset, as you take off, and you climb to altitude, and see the sun reappears over the Earth's curvature to watch it set all over again. Sunrise after sunrise, punching holes in the clouds. Watching lightning storms at night, or static discharge flash against the windshield, or the even rarer blue hue of St. Elmo's fire, turning into a fireball 10 feet in front of the nose. I think it's all worth it, but it's not as fun as you may think. My hair is turning gray at a shocking rate. Also, only about 3 to 5 of the flight attendants are remotely attractive, so you can get that out of your minds as well. Not to mention, out of the 12 years I've been flying, I've had 4 instances where I thought might not make it out of this, and considered what I may have to say to my wife on the cockpit voice recorder. Story 65 Teaching. Oh, you get summers off? No, I'm poor for 2 months unless I get a second job. And I'm usually burnt out because everyone expects us to do 40 different jobs for the excuse of a paycheck we get for one job. Story 66 Factory Test Driver. I work at a power sports company as an engineer. I love testing our product for an hour, or maybe even a day. To do it full-time, man, that would hot, sweaty, and dirty, plus getting beat up continuously from rough conditions. No thanks. Story 67 Ice Cream Shop. The free cup of ice cream we got at the end of the shift wasn't worth it. As part of the ice cream making process, we had to transfer the ice cream canister from the extremely cold freezer to a slightly less cold freezer before it's stored at the counter and ready to scoop. I had to take inventory of all the canisters often, but you couldn't be in the freezers for more than a couple minutes before the cold made it unsafe to stay in there. I did this for a summer and got a cold in the middle of July from shocking my body between the cold of the freezers and the heat waves outside, since the freezers were in different buildings. And sometimes the freezers would fail, so would have to remove all the ice cream and restock them in another freezer only to take them back when the freezer was fixed just hours later. Story 68, this isn't what I do, but it's what I always wanted to do growing up, but eventually heard it's not all that. Astronomer impression is that you just look through big telescopes all night, sifting through a bunch of stars, trying to find something that hasn't been seen before. But in reality, it's just a bunch of number crunching and algorithm running, reading papers, sitting and waiting. Actually going to an observatory to look at stars is a rare occasion for most astronomers, as today's machines used in the field are too complicated to even be used by them. Story 69, I've got 2. Professional musician and professional pilot. Both are hella fun to do as a hobby, as a job. Both seem glamorous and loaded with fun times, and generally they can be, at least initially. But then both become just work that isn't particularly fun nor glamorous, and also require putting up with a significant amount of toxic behavior from the general public, as well as co-workers and management. Not to mention, when you take your hobby and turn it into your job, you no longer have a hobby. Story 70 Event Producer. Seems cool, organize events, get to party sometimes, etc. In reality, it's ridiculously stressful. You're constantly putting out last-minute fires, and everyone who worked for you is constantly trying to find a way to steal from you or screw you over. It's a shady business full of shady people. Does get you laid more often, though. NGL. Story 71, anything design-related. Everyone thinks they sound fun and also that they could do them, but there's a huge amount of knowledge and skill required. And yes, a ton of tedious tasks, meetings, office politics, and competing opinions to navigate to make something that looks good. Story 72, as much as I hate to say it, being a barber is definitely up there. Still currently doing it, it's one of those jobs that is trendy or cool, because a lot of us barbers are tattooed and get to make our own schedules. We just get to hang out and talk to people all day. In reality, we have to work on our feet all day. I'm constantly sore from repetitive motion, scissors, clippers, hair drying, having to put up with super picky customers. I'm sorry, I can't make you look like Brad Pitt, along with people thinking they can just dump all of their problems on you. I sometimes feel like I'm a therapist. All of that while constantly being covered in hair, picking hair splinters out of my skin on a daily basis. Coworkers are usually super difficult to get along with in most cases. A lot of barbers have huge egos, always so much drama. Best case scenario is having your own shop working by yourself. All that being said, I do enjoy my job. Probably going to be cutting hair until the day I die, but it's definitely not for everyone. Story 73, Travel Advisor. We don't get to travel all the time. We don't make enough to do that. We spend hours on the phone with vendors, and we're used as human. Google's common questions include what currency is used in X country. Do I need a power adapter in Y country? How do I get foreign currency? Will my cell phone work over there? Etc., etc., etc. Dealing with people who have no idea where they want to go, and yet they want to go on vacation. Ask them what they want to see, and I get, oh, the touristy stuff, etc. Story 74. I was a librarian for 5 years, and while I loved it, a lot of people describe it as fun or being a good job for quiet people. And both are pretty big misconceptions. I worked in small libraries with barely any customers, so it was just boring, and huge ones where it felt like you never stopped. Antisocial behavior could also be a big problem, and I honestly spent a lot of my time helping people with IT issues. You also have to run a lot of events like signing nursery rhymes with families and reading stories aloud and doing actions. It would probably be for quiet, very introverted people. Don't get me wrong, it was an enjoyable job, but not the fun go Lou Cred talk about books adventure many people think it is. Story 75, Game development at mid-sized indie firms, bad production, unrealistic deadlines, poor pay for programmers, and a constant reminder that we make games for fun and are small. That's why nobody's getting raises apart from the board members and execs. Story 76, growing up, I always got the car magazines and would pore over pictures of the latest supercars and their unique specs and features. I thought my obscure knowledge of horsepower and top speeds would make me a good fit in car sales while allowing me to be closer to these objects with which I was infatuated. In reality, I was mostly talking people into poor financial decisions on boring cars, while working 50-hour weeks with no holidays while being berated by managers for not sealing the deal before someone walked off the lot. Selling cars sucks, but it gave me a thicker skin, a tolerance for longer hours, and some strategy for buying my next car.